Hi, Pat O'Connor here, Blackwood Family Enterprise Services. Next in the series of our conversations with Tom Deans, we asked about how do you deal with the emotional assets that are connected to an estate plan? Things that perhaps might not be the most valuable, things like the family cottage or a family heirloom or an old car or something like that that's got some emotion tied to it. How do you deal with those types of assets in your estate planning?
Tom, often we hear about wealthy families with large estates, yet the asset they get most twisted up over about is a cottage. And it might be a small little cabin in the back 40, but maybe comment on that and why that asset can be so important and how come, or how can you then deal with that type of an asset that's really an emotional connection?
Yeah, and the emotion does run deep. Those cottages carry, memories of the very best moments with the people who matter most in our lives. We don't invite random strangers to our cottage. We really reserve those cottage experiences to friends and family, people that we care about, and we cherish those memories. And then we make a fatal mistake often when it comes to our estate planning. We assume that everyone who is a part of those memories, typically our children, are sharing the exact same fondness of those memories. And that they will love and cherish that cottage as much as you do, or their parent does. And the reality is that for some people, they have great memories, but they don't live close to that cottage, or they've married someone who has a cottage themselves, or they just don't like cottages. They don't like mosquitoes. So often we have aging Canadians right now who are drafting wills, making assumptions about how much people in their family love their cottage, and they're going to leave a 2-bedroom cottage to 4 children who each have 4 children, and where they're somehow going to magically stuff 20, I have to do the math, 20 people into a cottage. It's not going to, the math doesn't work well. And so part of what I've been trying to get out in my book, Willing Wisdom, and part of what I'm trying to get in my public lectures like this is getting people to understand that they need to really think through these major division of assets like cottages because they require unique solutions. But it starts with people really working with a qualified advisor like yourself.
Also in an estate plan, we'll find things like jewelry, art, sports car, watch collection, those types of things that you don't often see in a will if there is a will. How do you suggest families deal with those types of personal assets?
It is a question that I deal with in my book, Willing Wisdom. And Pat, it sounds like like an odd solution, but it is a solution that works remarkably better than taking duct tape or sticky notes, Post-it notes. I often hear this, that people put Post-it notes on the bottom of a vase or behind a piece of artwork. They ask their kids who wants this and who wants that. So when someone dies, my experience is that sometimes people move sticky notes. It's not really a sticky solution. There's a better solution. I've watched actually twice in our family deal with this particular issue in a really novel way, and that's why I shared it in my book. The very first thing we do in the settlement of an estate is we transition cash to beneficiaries, typically children. And because we're cognizant that not everyone has the same income level, not everyone has high salaries in our family. So that first release of cash gives people the liquidity to then purchase things like artwork or cars or certain sentimental items from the estate because they have the financial ability to do that. And what we have found is often people who feign an interest in a particular item, when it comes to actually purchasing it, it's interesting how maybe it's not so important. So obviously when the executor of the estate sells those items, typically to family members first, they then have that cash, which they then release in the same proportion as they did the initial cash. So if there's 2 kids and the cash is released and then someone buys a watch, the executor, the estate, collects that cash and then gives 50% of the value of that watch right back to the person who bought it. They end up actually getting the watch for at half price. But this takes away all of the nonsense and the fighting and the jockeying. There are many people who actually want a watch. They actually don't want it. They just don't want their brother or sister to have it. This technique that I've just described actually eliminates all of that nonsense. But it really starts with a family working with an advisor like yourself to get good advice.
Tom, thanks so much for helping us understand your position on how best to deal with these emotional assets.